I am Chloe Vance, 32 years old, and for 7 years I was the perfect, supportive wife to my unemployed husband, Darnell. When his father, Elijah, passed away, Darnell inherited $65 million. The first thing he did? He threw me out of our house. He smirked, tossed my suitcase onto the lawn, and said, "I don't need you anymore, worthless woman." He thought the celebration had started. He had no idea what his father had actually planned. At the official will reading, the estate lawyer just gave him a look and asked, "Did you even bother to read the full will?" My ex-husband's panic was beautiful to watch. Before I tell you what that hidden clause said, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated, because this is the story of how I took everything. The story truly begins just 2 days earlier. The rain was cold, unforgiving, soaking through my thin black coat. I stood at the gravesite, holding a cheap umbrella, my heart aching as I watched them lower the casket of my father-in-law, Elijah Vance. He was the only person in Darnell's family who ever truly saw me, the only one who ever showed me kindness. I cried silent tears, the cold mixing with the grief. A few yards away, under a large dry canopy, stood my husband, Darnell, and his sister Tasha. They weren't crying. Darnell, 34 and unemployed for as long as I'd known him, was busy scrolling on his phone, probably checking his bank alerts or sports scores. Tasha, 36 and dripping in designer morning clothes that must have cost more than my car, was whispering intensely to her husband, Ryan. Ryan, a slick lawyer Tasha had married, just looked bored. He clearly just wanted the will reading to happen so he could start calculating his wife's cut. The service ended. As the other mourners began to leave, I stepped forward toward the grave, wanting one last moment. I picked up a handful of wet earth to toss onto the casket, a final, private goodbye. Tasha's expensive heel clicked on the wet pavement as she moved to block my path. Her face was a perfect mask of polite contempt. "That's enough, Chloe, don't you think?" I froze, my hand full of dirt. "What do you mean, Tasha?" "The performance," she hissed, keeping her voice low so the pastor wouldn't hear. "The show is over. My father is gone. You don't have to pretend to be the grieving, dutiful daughter-in-law anymore. Your role in this family is finished." Before I could even process the cruelty of that statement, Darnell sauntered over, finally pocketing his phone. "She's right, Chloe. Stop being so dramatic." He looked at the dirt in my hand and sneered. "You act like you were close to him. My father barely tolerated you." I flinched. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Darnell scoffed. "He always said you were a charity case. He told me he only put up with your non-profit nonsense because he felt sorry for you. You don't make any real money. You don't contribute anything. You're just around." His words felt like acid. He barely tolerated you. But my mind flashed back just 3 weeks ago. Elijah was frail, sitting in his study, the smell of old books and bourbon filling the air. He was coughing, holding a complex schematic for his logistics company, Vance Innovations. "Darnell doesn't understand this," Elijah had wheezed, tapping the paper. "He thinks these trucks just drive themselves. He only wants the money. But you, Chloe, you have an engineer's brain. You understand how the system works. You're the only one in this house who gets it." I came back to the present, the cold rain dripping from my umbrella. I looked at Darnell's smug face and Tasha's cruel smirk. I straightened my back. "You have no idea what your father and I discussed, Darnell." Tasha let out a sharp, ugly laugh. "Oh, I think we do. Ryan, my husband, the real lawyer, already looked at the preliminary drafts. Dad left everything to Darnell, the company, the house, the stocks, $65 million. She leaned in close, her expensive perfume making me nauseous. "So you better learn your place, Chloe. You better be very nice to us, because from now on you're living on my brother's charity, and his charity just ran out." I watched them walk away, laughing together as they got into their black Escalade. I stood alone at the grave, the cold dirt turning to mud in my fist. I wasn't just grieving my father-in-law. I was grieving the end of my life as I knew it. I had no idea how right I was. That night, the house was cold and silent. It felt wrong. The sprawling mansion, usually filled with Elijah's jazz music or the sound of the news, was just empty. I was in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea I didn't even want to drink. I was just trying to feel something other than the cold emptiness. My black funeral dress was still damp from the rain. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but sleep felt impossible. The sound of the front door slamming open made me jump, spilling tea onto my hand. I heard Darnell's voice, not in grief, but in triumph. Finally, it's about damn time. He burst into the kitchen, waving a thick cream-colored envelope from his father's estate lawyer. He wasn't wearing his suit anymore. He was in a silk robe, his eyes alive and frantic. "It's here, Chloe, the official confirmation. $65 million. He kissed the envelope. "The whole company, Vance Innovations, all the stocks, this house. It's all mine. All of it." My stomach turned. "Darnell," I said softly, my voice hoarse from crying. "Please, your father. He's not even gone a full day. I know you're hurting." He stopped and looked at me as if I'd just spoken a different language. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, ugly sound that echoed horribly in the quiet house. "Hurting?" he shouted. "Hurting? I'm free. That's what I am." Before I could react, he stormed out of the kitchen and returned a moment later, dragging an empty suitcase from the hall closet. He hurled it at me. It struck my chest hard, knocking the breath from my lungs. "Pack your bags. Get out. Now." I stared at him, the empty suitcase at my feet. What? What are you talking about? Darnell, I don't understand." "What's not to understand?" he snarled, yanking open the refrigerator and pulling out a bottle of champagne. "My father is gone. The old man is finally gone. And that means I don't have to pretend anymore." "Pretend?" "Yes, pretend," he yelled, popping the cork. Champagne foamed onto the expensive tile floor. "Pretend to be a good son. Pretend to care about logistics and shipping routes. And pretend to be your husband. You think I ever wanted to marry you?" Each word was a physical blow. "But you said—" "I said what my father told me to say," he spat. "He wouldn't give me my allowance unless I settled down. 'Marry Chloe,' he'd say. 'She's sensible, she's stable, she'll be good for you.' You know what he meant, Chloe? He meant you were cheap. You were low maintenance. You had no family, no money, no standards. You were so desperate for a home that you'd put up with anything, and you did. For 7 years you did." I was shaking, my back pressed against the cold counter. He just died. How can you—" "Now he's dead and I'm rich," he bellowed, taking a long drink from the bottle. "I don't need a sensible wife anymore. I don't need some failed woman who left a perfectly good job in Chicago just to follow me around. I don't need a partner who wastes her time doing charity work for pennies instead of making real money. I don't need you, you worthless, useless woman." The kitchen door swung open again. Tasha walked in, followed by her husband, Ryan. They were both smiling. Tasha looked at the suitcase on the floor and then at me. "Still here, Chloe? I thought Darnell would have taken out the trash by now." Ryan stepped forward, holding a single sheet of paper. He had a smug, reptilian smile that I'd always hated. "Chloe," he said, his tone dripping with false professionalism. "I am acting as Darnell's personal attorney in this matter. Darnell has authorized me to inform you that your name is not on the deed to this house or any other property. Legally, you are a guest, and your invitation has been revoked. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises before we have you removed for trespassing." I looked from Ryan's cold face to Tasha's triumphant one, and finally to Darnell, who was wiping champagne from his chin. 7 years, I whispered, my throat tight. Darnell, I gave up my career in Chicago for you. I moved here. When your father got sick, for 6 months, I was the one who took him to his appointments. I was the one who held his hand. I was the one who managed his medication while you were out playing golf. Darnell's face darkened. He walked over to me until he was just inches from my face. I could smell the alcohol on his breath. Taking care of him was your job, you stupid cow. It's what you were good for. You were his nurse, but I don't need a nurse, and I don't need you. He turned his head and spat on the floor, the saliva landing just inches from my foot. Get out of my house. The lock on the front door clicked shut behind me with a sound of finality. It was midnight. The rain from the funeral had returned, turning from a drizzle into a cold, driving downpour. I stood on the sidewalk, the single suitcase Darnell had thrown at me feeling impossibly heavy. The wheels caught on a crack in the pavement as I started to walk, with no destination in mind. My phone felt like a lead brick in my trembling hand. I had nowhere to go. Darnell had isolated me over the years, skillfully painting my Chicago friends as bad influences until I'd lost touch. My life had become entirely about him and his family. But there was one person left. Jasmine, my best friend since college. She knew Darnell was difficult. She'd warned me about him. She would help. I ducked under the awning of a closed flower shop, shivering, and dialed her number. It rang once, twice. I was about to give up when she finally answered, her voice a strained whisper. Chloe? Oh my God, are you okay? It's 1 a.m. Tears streamed down my face, mixing with the rain. Jasmine, I need help. Darnell, he kicked me out. Elijah passed away and Darnell inherited everything, and he threw me out of the house. I'm on the street. I have nowhere to go. Can I just come to your place? Just for tonight? There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line. All I could hear was her breathing and the faint sound of her husband Mark whispering in the background. Jasmine? I pleaded, my voice breaking. Chloe, she finally said, her voice sounding tight and strange. I can't. You can't come here. What? Why? Jasmine, please, I'm soaking wet. He called Mark, she interrupted, her voice dropping lower. Darnell. He called Mark about an hour ago. He said he just inherited $65 million. And he said if we helped you, if we so much as let you sleep on our couch, he would pull all of his new capital out of Mark's business. I couldn't breathe. Mark's new tech startup was his life. Darnell and Elijah had been early investors, but only on a small scale. He wouldn't, I whispered. He doesn't even know how. He doesn't have to, Jasmine was crying now. He just has to tell Ryan to do it. Chloe, $65 million? He could crush us. He could ruin Mark. He said he would make it his mission. Chloe, I am so sorry. I can't. We have kids. I have to go. The line went dead. She had hung up on me. The power Darnell now wielded was absolute. He wasn't just my abusive husband. He was an untouchable millionaire who could destroy lives with a single phone call. The betrayal from my best friend hurt almost as much as Darnell's. I was shivering violently now, my clothes plastered to my skin. I had one last option. One I hadn't used in months because the conversations were always so painful. I dialed my mother's number in Atlanta. She picked up on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep and annoyance. Chloe, what on earth is wrong now? Mom, I sobbed, unable to hold it back. Mom, Darnell kicked me out. Elijah died, and Darnell got all the money, and he threw me out. I'm on the street, I don't have any money. My friend won't take me in. Mom, I don't know what to do. My mother was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. It was a sound of deep, weary disappointment, a sound I had heard my entire life. I heard the news, Chloe. Tasha called me this evening, $65 million. Her voice wasn't sympathetic. It was impressed. Mom, he threw me out. He spat at me. And what did you do to provoke him? She snapped, suddenly wide awake. $65 million, Chloe. You had one job. One. To keep that man happy. I told you to be patient. I told you to be a good, supportive wife. But you always had to be so stubborn, didn't you? Always with your opinions and your non-profit work. Rich men don't like all that. They want a woman who is soft, who agrees. You ruined it, Chloe. You ruined everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, he was cheating on me. He told me I was worthless. He threw a suitcase at my chest. Then you apologize, she shrieked. You get back to that house, you get on your knees, and you beg him to forgive you. You fix this. You don't throw away a $65 million life because your feelings got a little hurt. Go back and apologize to him right now. Mom, I cried, desperate for her to hear me, to just be a mother for 1 second. He was abusive, Mom. I don't want to hear it. She cut me off, her voice cold as ice. I am not going to be dragged into your drama. You made your bed, Chloe. You were too proud to be a proper wife, and now you've lost everything. Do not call me again until you fix this with your husband. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the screen dark. My best friend. My own mother. Both of them had chosen Darnell. They had chosen the money. I sank down onto the wet, garbage-strewn sidewalk, pulling my single suitcase close. The rain hammered down, but I didn't feel it anymore. I was completely numb. Darnell was right. Tasha was right. My mother was right. I was alone. I had nothing. I was worthless. I must have walked for an hour. My feet were numb. The rain had finally eased, but the cold was deep in my bones. I was a ghost dragging a suitcase through the sleeping city. I had no one. My best friend, Jasmine, had chosen her husband's business. My own mother had chosen the fantasy of Darnell's $65 million over her own daughter. I was completely alone. But as I stood shivering under a flickering streetlight, a thought cut through the fog. A small, persistent thought I had not had in years. The key. I stopped, my breath hitching. I fumbled in the secret pocket of my wallet, the one Darnell never knew about, the one he never bothered to look in. My fingers touched the cold metal of a single old-fashioned key. The Southside apartment, my escape hatch. I had rented it 7 years ago, right after I moved from Chicago to marry Darnell. I used the last of my savings from my Chicago job to pay the deposit and the first 6 months. Darnell thought I was a fool. Why do you need that dump? He had asked. I told him it was a small studio for my non-profit work, a quiet place to write grant proposals. He bought the lie because he did not care. He did not care what I did, as long as it did not bother him. For 7 years, I had secretly paid the rent online, keeping this one small piece of my old life, just in case. I never imagined just in case would look like this. It took me another 40 minutes to get there, dragging my suitcase onto the late-night bus. The neighborhood was humble, working class, a world away from the Vance mansion. The building was a simple brick walk-up. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, my wet clothes dripping on the worn carpet. I slid the key into the lock of apartment 3B. It turned smoothly. I pushed the door open. The air was stale but dry. I flipped the light switch. The room was sparse, almost empty. A small kitchenette, a narrow bathroom, a single futon, and a simple desk. I dropped my suitcase and walked over to the desk, my refuge. On it sat the only personal item in the room, a framed photograph. It was not a picture of me and Darnell. It was not a family photo from Christmas. It was a picture of me and Elijah, my father-in-law. We were at the Vance Innovations warehouse. We were both wearing hard hats and safety vests, smiling, leaning over a massive, complex piece of sorting machinery. We looked like partners. We looked happy. Staring at his kind face, a memory I had buried deep inside me came rushing back. It was about a year ago. Elijah had been coughing terribly, the cancer already taking its toll. He had called me into his home office, not the house, but his real office at the company. Darnell was in Miami with Tasha and Ryan, celebrating some pointless deal. Elijah was sitting behind his desk, looking at a stack of red-flagged invoices. "He lost it, Chloe," Elijah wheezed, his voice rough. "Darnell. He lost the entire $5 million Kensington contract because he forgot to file the shipping manifests. Just forgot." "Oh, Elijah, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," he snapped. "Be better than him. He only wants the money, Chloe. He doesn't want the work. He doesn't understand the system." He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "But you do. I've seen you. I saw the proposal you wrote for that nonprofit of yours. The logistics plan was brilliant. Better than anything my own team has come up with." He pushed a binder across the desk. "I need help, Chloe. Real help. Darnell can't know. Tasha and that snake in the grass husband of hers can't know. I need someone to run the back end, the logistics, the actual work." I was stunned. But Darnell said you didn't. Darnell says a lot of things. I need to know if I can trust you. Can I trust you to keep a secret? Can I trust you to save my company from my own idiot son?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I can. I'll manage the logistics. No one has to know." Elijah grasped my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "You have an engineer's brain, Chloe. You understand how things work. You should have been my son." I touched the glass of the photo, my fingers tracing Elijah's smiling face. For a whole year, I had been his secret COO. Just then, my phone buzzed, vibrating violently on the wooden desk. It made me jump. I looked at the screen. Darnell. My blood ran cold. He had never called me this much in 7 years. I let it ring, but he immediately called back. And again. Finally, I answered, putting it on speaker. "What?" I said, my voice flat. "There you are, you bitch!" he yelled. "I've been calling you, listen to me. The will reading is Friday, 10 a.m., Hayes Law Offices. You have to be there." "Why?" I asked. "So you can spit on me again? So Tasha can call me a charity case?" "Because," he snarled, his voice full of frustrated entitlement. "Ryan says you have to be there to sign the papers. Something about spousal rights to the house. You have to sign them so I can sell it. So you be there. Don't be late. And don't wear that pathetic funeral dress. Try to look like you're worth something for once." He hung up. I stood there in the silent apartment, the dial tone buzzing. He needed me. He needed my signature to get his money. A slow smile spread across my face. "Oh, Darnell," I whispered to the empty room. "You have no idea what you've just done." I slept for maybe 3 hours. When the alarm on my phone buzzed at 6 a.m. on Friday morning, I did not hit snooze. I sat up on the narrow futon. The small studio apartment was cold, but I felt a strange, icy calm. The fear and desperation from the night before had burned away, leaving something hard and sharp in their place. Darnell wanted me at the lawyer's office at 10 a.m. He wanted me to sign away my rights. He thought I was beaten. He thought I was broken. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. I showered in the tiny bathroom. The water pressure was weak, but at least it was hot. I looked at my reflection in the small, cracked mirror. The woman staring back looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes, and my face was pale. But my eyes were not defeated. I opened the small closet where I kept a few changes of clothes. Darnell and Tasha always mocked my wardrobe. I did not spend thousands on designer labels. I worked for a non-profit. My money went to my secret rent and necessities. But I had one good suit. It was a simple charcoal gray pantsuit. It was not flashy, but it was perfectly tailored. It was the suit I wore when I met with major donors for the charity, the suit I wore when I needed to be taken seriously. It was my armor. I did my makeup carefully, not to look beautiful, but to look professional, covering the dark circles. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. No weakness, no vulnerability. Today was not about grief or betrayal. Today was about business. Elijah's business. I drank a black coffee standing by the window, watching the city wake up. I did not check my phone. I knew it would be empty. No apologies from Darnell, no supportive texts from my mother or Jasmine. It did not matter. They had all made their choice. Now, I was making mine. At 9:15 a.m., I grabbed my simple leather briefcase, the one Darnell always called my little school bag, and walked out the door. I took the bus downtown. I did not take a taxi or an Uber. I wanted to stay grounded, to remember who I was. I walked into the lobby of the skyscraper that housed Hayes Law offices at exactly 9:45 a.m. The opulence of the waiting room on the 40th floor was designed to intimidate. Plush white carpets, expensive modern art on the walls, and a panoramic view of the entire city. And sitting in the middle of it all, like royalty on their new thrones, were Darnell, Tasha, and Ryan. My breath caught. They had not just shown up, they had transformed. Darnell was wearing a brand new, flashy pinstripe suit, something Italian and expensive, probably costing $10,000. He had a new, blindingly gold watch on his wrist. Tasha was dripping in diamonds. A necklace and earrings that I knew for a fact had belonged to Elijah's late wife. She must have raided the estate's safe before the will was even read. They were laughing, loudly. And then, Darnell was saying to Ryan, I'm going to buy the marina. Why just one yacht? I want the whole damn dock. The Miami villa Tasha found is perfect, Ryan said, sipping an espresso from a tiny cup. We can finalize the purchase this afternoon, as soon as this little formality is over. They had not seen me. I stood by the door, invisible to them, just as I had been for 7 years. They were already spending the $65 million. They were celebrating, not even 48 hours after Elijah's funeral. The disrespect, the sheer, profound greed, solidified the ice in my veins. I cleared my throat. I'm here. Their laughter cut off instantly. 3 heads swiveled toward me. Tasha's face twisted into a mask of pure disgust. Oh, look, she said, her voice carrying across the silent, expensive room. The sewer rat actually crawled out of her hole. Darnell smirked, looking me up and down. Jesus, Chloe, you're actually wearing that? What is that, your little charity fundraiser suit? The one you wear when you beg for donations? Tasha joined in, her laugh like broken glass. You look like you're applying for a secretarial job, Chloe, not attending a $65 million will reading. But I guess you wear what you know. You should have at least tried to look presentable. It's honestly embarrassing. I did not say a word. I just walked past them and sat in a firm leather chair on the opposite side of the room, placing my simple briefcase on the floor beside me. My silence, my refusal to react, clearly infuriated them more than any argument could have. Ryan, the white brother-in-law, stood up. He was the only one who seemed to have a plan. He walked over to me, his expensive shoes silent on the thick carpet. He placed a folder and a check on the table in front of me. It was a cashier's check for $100,000. All right, Chloe, he said, his voice low and threatening. Let's cut the drama. Darnell, in his infinite generosity, is offering you this. It's more than you've ever earned in your entire life. I looked at the check, but did not touch it. Here's the deal, Ryan continued, tapping the folder. You sign these papers. They waive all spousal claims to the estate, the house, the company, everything. You take your charity money and you disappear. For good. And if I do not? I asked, my voice quiet. Ryan's smile was gone. Then we make this complicated. We contest the divorce. We will countersue you for emotional distress during the marriage. We will drag your name through the mud and tie you up in court until you don't have a penny left to your name. We will ruin you. Do you understand me? I looked at his smug face. I looked at Tasha, who was now filing her nails, looking bored. I looked at Darnell, who was already back on his phone, admiring his new watch. No, thank you, I said. Ryan blinked, confused. What? I said no. I am not signing anything. I will wait for the official will reading, thank you. Darnell finally looked up, his face red with annoyance. Are you stupid? He's offering you 100 grand. Take the money, you fool. I'll wait, I repeated. Darnell scoffed. Still hoping, aren't you, you pathetic idiot? You really think my father left you something? He hated you. Before he could say more, the heavy oak door to the conference room opened. A woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and an impeccable gray suit, stood in the doorway. It was Mrs. Hayes, Elijah's longtime attorney. We are ready, she said. Her eyes met mine for just a second, and I saw something. Not pity. Respect. Mr. Vance, Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Vance, please come in. The conference room was vast and cold. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the gray city skyline like a dark mirror. I sat on one side, alone, my simple leather briefcase on the floor. On the other side sat the victors, Darnell, Tasha, and Ryan. They looked like a pack of wolves energized by the kill, already dividing the spoils in their minds. They had been laughing when they walked in, but now a greedy silence settled over them. Mrs. Hayes sat at the head of the table. She was an older, impeccably dressed black woman who had been Elijah's lawyer for 30 years. Her face was a mask of professional neutrality. She opened a thick, leather-bound document. We are gathered today to read the last will and testament of Elijah Vance. As per his instructions, the will must be read in its entirety, with all named parties present. Tasha immediately leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. Mrs. Hayes, can we please dispense with the formalities? We all know what this is about. Ryan, my husband, has already reviewed the preliminary asset summaries. It's quite straightforward. Just tell us the part where Darnell inherits the 65 million, have her. She flicked a perfectly manicured hand in my direction. Sign the waiver, and we can all get on with our very busy lives. Mrs. Hayes slowly, deliberately, put on her reading glasses. She looked at Tasha over the rims. No, Mrs. Miller, we cannot. Your father's will is a complex legal document, not a suggestion box. He was extremely specific that every word be read aloud. He was particularly insistent about the conditions and codicils. We will proceed as he instructed. Darnell let out a loud, theatrical sigh. Just read the damn thing already. My old man loved to hear himself talk, even from the grave. Let's get this over with so I can finally access my money. Mrs. Hayes ignored him. I, Elijah Vance, she began, her voice clear and steady, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. She read through the first few paragraphs, the legal jargon washing over the room. Then she got to the minor bequests. To my alma mater, Howard University, I bequeath the sum of $50,000 for the Engineering Scholarship Fund. Tasha scoffed. 50 grand. He was always wasting money on that school. Mrs. Hayes continued, undeterred. To my housekeeper of 20 years, Maria Gonzalez, I bequeath the sum of $25,000 in gratitude for her loyalty. He gave the maid $25,000? Darnell whispered loudly to Ryan, who just shrugged, clearly impatient. To the Southside Community Youth Center, where my daughter-in-law, Chloe Vance, currently volunteers. My head snapped up. Darnell and Tasha both stiffened. I bequeath the sum of $100,000 to be administered by Chloe Vance for the creation of a new computer engineering program. Tasha slammed her hand on the table. This is ridiculous. He's giving money to her charity? He must have been senile. It's not her charity, Tasha, I said quietly. It's the community center. Silence, Ryan hissed at Tasha, his eyes on Mrs. Hayes. Let her finish. That's all just peanuts. Get to the real assets. Mrs. Hayes turned the page. We now come to the primary assets of my estate. This includes my personal properties, my stock portfolio, and all shares and controlling interest in Vance Innovations, valued at this time at an estimated $65 million. The room was utterly silent. Darnell was leaning so far forward he was almost off his chair. Mrs. Hayes continued, All said assets, properties, and the controlling interest of Vance Innovations I leave entirely to my only son, Darnell Vance. Darnell exploded. He shot up from his chair, knocking it over. Yes, yes, $65 million. Did you hear that? He ran around the table, his face red with triumph, and stopped right in front of me. He pointed a shaking finger in my face. In your face, Chloe. In your worthless, ugly face. $65 million. And what do you get? Nothing. You get thrown out on the street. I told you. I told you my father hated you. He knew you were a worthless, gold-digging whore. And now I'm rich. I'm rich. And you are nothing. Tasha and Ryan were clapping, Tasha letting out a shrill whoo of celebration. Darnell was panting, his eyes wild, reveling in his victory and my humiliation. I just stared at him. I did not cry. I did not move. In the middle of Darnell's victory dance, Mrs. Hayes cleared her throat. Her voice cut through the air like a razor. With one condition. Darnell froze, his arm still pointed at me. The smile on Tasha's face wavered. Ryan stopped clapping. What? Darnell said, his voice dropping. What did you say? Mrs. Hayes looked up from the document, her eyes locking onto Darnell's with a look of pure ice. I said, with one condition. It's the very next line, Darnell. Did you bother to read the full copy of the will I sent you? Or were you too busy picking out your new yacht? Darnell's triumphant roar died in his throat. His face, just moments ago flushed with victory, went pale. Condition? What condition? There's no condition. He lunged across the table and snatched the bound will from in front of Mrs. Hayes. His hands, clumsy with panic, fumbled with the pages. Where? Show me. There's nothing in here about a condition. Ryan, his lawyer husband, looked equally stunned. He grabbed his own copy, his eyes scanning the pages frantically. I just glanced at the preliminary notes, Darnell, Ryan stammered, his slick confidence gone. I assumed the conditional clauses were standard boilerplate. Language about not contesting the will, things like that. You assumed? Tasha shrieked at her husband. You're a lawyer! What the hell did we pay you for? Everyone, please, Mrs. Hayes said, her voice cutting through their rising panic. She calmly took the will back from Darnell. If you had read past the first sentence of Article 4, Mr. Vance, you would know the condition. Allow me to read it for you. She cleared her throat, her eyes fixed on Darnell. Darnell Vance shall inherit my full estate, including Vance Innovations, on the condition that, within 12 months from the date of my passing, he must personally oversee the company's operations and achieve a documented 10% profit growth compared to the previous fiscal year. A wave of relief washed over Darnell's face. He let out a shaky laugh. That's it? 10%? Is that all the old man had? He looked at Tasha. I can do 10% in my sleep. Tasha laughed too, her confidence returning. Of course you can, honey. That's nothing. We'll just fire half the dead weight on the payroll. That'll boost the profit margin overnight. Elijah was always too soft. Ryan nodded, recomposing himself. Exactly. It's a performance metric. We can easily manage that. It's symbolic. I watched them, this trio of hyenas, already planning how to gut the company Elijah had spent his life building. I knew something they didn't. I knew Elijah had spent the last year acquiring 2 smaller, failing logistics companies. He had done it to save jobs, but it meant the company was currently operating at a loss. Achieving a 10% profit wasn't just difficult, it was impossible for someone like Darnell. It was a trap. Mrs. Hayes waited patiently for their self-congratulations to die down. When they finally settled, she continued, "And," she said, her voice dropping just slightly, "the will continues." Darnell rolled his eyes. "Oh God, there's more?" "Yes. And if my son, Darnell Vance, fails to meet this 10% growth objective, or if he attempts to sell any part of Vance Innovations, or if he is removed from his leadership role by the board of directors for any reason, including negligence. Tasha leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Or what? What happens then? Mrs. Hayes turned the page. Then, in that event, the entire $65 million estate, including all shares of Vance Innovations, all real estate holdings, and all liquid assets, shall immediately and irrevocably be transferred in full. To who? Tasha demanded. To me? It transfers to me, right? Or to Ryan? Darnell looked around the room, his eyes wide and frantic, like a cornered animal. Who? Who does it go to? Mrs. Hayes's gaze lifted slowly from the will. She did not look at Darnell, or Tasha, or Ryan. Her eyes settled directly on me, the woman they had all ignored, the woman Tasha had called a sewer rat. The will states, Mrs. Hayes said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, that in the event of Darnell's failure, the entire estate shall be transferred immediately to my beloved daughter-in-law, Chloe Vance. The silence in the room became absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the expensive clock on the wall. Darnell's mouth was hanging open, his face a mask of confusion. Ryan's legal pad slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the mahogany table. Tasha was the first to find her voice. What? It was not a word, but a shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. What did you say? Darnell finally processed the words. No, no, that's impossible. The old man was senile. He must have been. This thing? He jabbed his finger at me again, his whole body shaking. This bitch? She doesn't know anything about the company. She's a non-profit loser. She writes grant proposals. Ryan, the lawyer, finally found his voice, though it was shaky. Mrs. Hayes, this is highly irregular. It's grounds for a contest. We will claim undue influence. She clearly manipulated a sick old man. Mrs. Hayes held up a single, perfectly manacled hand. That, she said, a small, cold smile playing on her lips, is the most interesting part, Mr. Vance. You are quite right. Right? Chloe doesn't work for a non-profit. She hasn't, in fact, for 3 years. Darnell looked lost. What? What are you talking about? She leaves every morning in that stupid gray suit, carrying that pathetic little briefcase? She does, Mrs. Hayes agreed. And she drives to Vance Innovations, just as she has done every weekday for the last 36 months. She just parks in the executive garage, a privilege Elijah granted her himself. She turned the page again. Which brings me to Appendix B, Executive Appointments. 3 years ago, Mrs. Hayes read, her voice ringing with clarity, Elijah Vance, faced with declining profits and what he called gross incompetence from his son, secretly appointed Chloe Vance as the Shadow Chief Operating Officer, or COO, of Vance Innovations. She looked up at Darnell, whose face had gone from red to a sickly mottled white. Are you wondering why profits have increased 30% in the last 3 years, Mr. Vance, while you were at home managing your portfolio, which I believe is what you told your father you did? It was not magic. It was Mrs. Vance. She looked at me. Every strategic partnership, every new logistics contract, every efficiency protocol that saved this company from bankruptcy was authored and executed by Chloe. Tasha was shaking her head, whispering, no, 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 over and over. Ryan looked like he was going to be physically ill. Darnell just stared at me. His eyes were wide, unblinking. He saw me now, really saw me for the first time. The worthless woman, the charity case, the low-maintenance wife he had thrown out in the rain. You, he whispered, his voice cracking. It was you? I finally leaned forward. I had not spoken a single word since entering the room. I looked my husband in the eye, the man who had spat at my feet and called me a whore. I ran your father's company, I said, my voice clear and cold as ice. I ran it while you slept. I saved it while you spent it. I stood up, gathering my simple briefcase. And Darnell, I added, allowing myself a small, tight smile. You have exactly 12 months to figure out how to do my job. A job you didn't even know existed. Good luck. Ryan, his face slick with sweat, jumped to his feet. He was a lawyer, and lawyers never admit defeat. "This is absurd," he shouted, his voice cracking. "We will contest this. A secret appointment? A shadow COO? It's not legal. It won't hold up in court." We'll argue Elijah was not of sound mind. He was clearly being manipulated by her. He pointed at me, but his hand was shaking. The accusation felt weak, pathetic. Mrs. Hayes simply pressed a button on a remote control. Elijah anticipated that argument as well, Mr. Miller. A large screen descended from the ceiling, covering the oil painting of Elijah's grandfather. The screen flickered to life. The image was high definition, showing Elijah sitting in his study. The date and time were clearly stamped in the bottom corner. 1 month ago, just 2 weeks before his death. He looked frail, yes, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and angry. "If you are watching this," Elijah said, his voice raspy but full of its old authority, "it means my idiot son Darnell is throwing a tantrum. It means he's finally realized that my $65 million empire doesn't just fall into his lap like a casino jackpot." Tasha gasped. "How dare he?" Elijah on the screen continued, as if hearing her. "Darnell, you are a disappointment. You are lazy, entitled, and you have the business sense of a hamster. This company," he slammed his fist on the desk, "is my life's work. I built it from nothing. I cannot leave it to someone who would bankrupt it in 6 months to buy a faster car or a bigger boat." Darnell was sinking low in his chair, his face a mottled purple. "But Chloe," Elijah's expression on the screen softened. "Chloe has my brain. She has my grit. For 3 years, while my own son was complaining that his allowance wasn't big enough, Chloe Vance has been secretly running the day-to-day operations of this company. She has been my COO in all but name." He looked directly into the camera, and it felt like he was looking right at me. "That 30% profit increase we showed last year, that wasn't me, that was Chloe. The new logistics software that saved us $12 million, that was Chloe's idea. She saved this company while you," he pointed, as if at Darnell, "were trying to bleed it dry." Tasha and Ryan were speechless. Darnell looked like he was going to vomit. "So I created this test," Elijah continued, a cold smile touching his lips. "This 10% profit challenge. It's a trap, Darnell. A trap I know you are too stupid and too arrogant to avoid. You can't achieve 10% profit because, as Chloe knows, I just leveraged the company to acquire 2 smaller firms. We are positioned for massive growth next year. But this year we are operating at a planned loss. A loss you would have seen if you'd ever bothered to read a balance sheet." He leaned back, looking tired but satisfied. "You will fail the test, and when you do, the entire estate legally transfers to Chloe. It is the only way I could protect my legacy from my own blood. It is the only way to ensure the company goes to the one person who actually earned it." The video ended. Mrs. Hayes turned the screen off. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, Elijah's voice filled the room one last time, this time from a speaker. It was a final audio addendum, his voice weaker, recorded just days before he died. "Chloe," he whispered, "I'm proud of you. I trust you. Don't let that fool, my son, destroy what we built. Protect my legacy. Protect my company. You are the real Vance in this family." The video clicked off. The giant screen went black, plunging the conference room back into a heavy, oppressive silence. Darnell was still staring at the blank screen, his mouth slightly open. He wasn't just beaten, he was humiliated. Publicly, meticulously. By his own father, from the grave. The $65 million wasn't just gone. It had been a phantom, a carrot dangled in front of him just long enough for him to prove his own incompetence. His father's last act on earth was to call him a lazy, stupid, entitled fool, and to do it on camera. Tasha was frozen. Her perfectly made-up face was a mask of chalky white. Ryan, the lawyer, the one who had been so smug just minutes ago, was shuffling his legal pads, his hands visibly shaking. He knew. They all knew. There was no legal argument against that video. It was a testator's final, undeniable, and devastating word. Darnell made a sound. It was not a word. It was a low, animalistic groan that started deep in his chest. He slid out of his expensive chair. He did not stand up. He slid, collapsing onto the plush carpet on his hands and knees. He looked utterly broken. And then he started to move. He crawled. On his hands and knees, this 34-year-old man in his brand-new $10,000 pinstripe suit crawled across the floor. He crawled past Ryan. He crawled past Tasha. He crawled right over to my chair. "Chloe," he whimpered. His voice was thick. He grabbed the hem of my simple gray pantsuit. "Chloe, baby, please." I looked down at the top of his head. This was the man who had spat at my feet 2 nights ago. This was the man who had called me a worthless, useless woman. "Chloe, you know I love you, right?" he sobbed, his shoulders shaking. "Baby, please. You have to tell them it's not true. You have to help me." "It's all on video, Darnell," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "It was a test," he shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "It was just a test. I was testing you, baby, to see if you really loved me. When I threw you out, when I said those things, I didn't mean it. I was just seeing if you would fight for me. And you did. You fought. You're so smart, Chloe. You won. You won the test." He was completely unhinged, trying to rewrite 3 days of unimaginable cruelty as some sort of twisted romantic game. He clutched my leg, his cheek pressing against my knee. "We're still married, Chloe," he pleaded, his voice desperate. That means it's our money. It's ours. We're a team. I'll split it with you. 50-50. I swear to God. Okay, 60-40. You take 60. You can have 60%. Just tell Mrs. Hayes to stop. Tell her you forgive me." I looked at his hands, his flashy gold watch looking absurd as he groveled on the floor. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, not even satisfaction. Just a vast, cold emptiness. I calmly reached down and unhooked his fingers from my ankle, one by one. He looked up at me, his face a pathetic mess of tears and mucus. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my pantsuit. "Darnell," I said, my voice quiet and clear in the silent room. "You were right about one thing." "I was?" he asked, a tiny, desperate flicker of hope in his wet eyes. "Yes, the other night, when you threw me out of the house. You said you didn't need a worthless, useless wife. You said you didn't need me." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You were absolutely right. And I don't need you. I don't need a lazy, unemployed, abusive husband. Get off the floor, Darnell. You're embarrassing yourself." He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. I turned away from him. I turned my back on my husband, on Tasha, on Ryan, and I looked at the only person in the room who mattered, Mrs. Hayes. She was watching me, her expression unreadable, but her eyes sharp. "Mrs. Hayes," I said, my voice strong and steady, "I would like to file for divorce, immediately." Ryan and Tasha, who had been frozen in horror, both gasped. "On what grounds?" Ryan stammered, trying to find his legal footing. "On the grounds of," I said, ticking them off on my fingers, "extreme emotional abuse, adultery, which he openly admitted to, and spousal abandonment, when he threw me out of my home." Mrs. Hayes nodded, making a note on her legal pad. "I will have the papers drawn up this afternoon, Mrs. Vance." She then looked up, a hint of a smile on her lips. "And as the de facto chief operating officer of Vance Innovations, will you also be pressing charges against Mr. Vance for willful damage to company assets? Firing the COO without cause, which is precisely what he did when he threw you out, has certainly caused significant harm to the company's stability and operational continuity. Tasha's face went from white to green. Ryan looked like he was going to faint. They hadn't even considered that. I did not even look at Darnell. I did not look at Tasha or Ryan. I did not answer Mrs. Hayes. The legal questions did not matter right now. The fight was over. I had won. I simply walked out of the conference room, my footsteps silent on the thick carpet. I left them in that room, frozen in their new reality. Darnell was still on the floor, a pathetic heap. Tasha and Ryan were staring at each other, the realization of their complete and total ruin just beginning to dawn on them. I walked down the marble hallway, past the reception desk, and toward the private executive elevator at the end of the hall. The one that required a special key, the one I had never used until today. I could hear Tasha's voice rise from the conference room behind me. "Where is she going? What is she doing now?" I heard Ryan whisper, "She's going to the elevator, but it's locked." Only Elijah had... As I reached the elevator, I heard Mrs. Hayes's voice, clear and precise, cutting through their confusion. "Oh, my apologies. I did forget one final addendum from Appendix C regarding Mr. Vance's personal office." I slid the old-fashioned, heavy brass key from my briefcase, the key Elijah had given me. I heard Mrs. Hayes reading from the will, her voice echoing down the hall. "The key to my private office, along with sole access to my personal financial accounts and the executive elevator, I have already entrusted to the one person who understands their true purpose." I slid the key into the lock. It clicked open. "I gave this key to Chloe Vance 3 months ago, on the day I named her my successor." The memory was so clear it felt like yesterday. Elijah was in his study, the smell of bourbon and old paper. He had handed me the key. "You keep this, Chloe," he'd said, his hand covering mine. "Don't tell anyone. Not Darnell, not Tasha. This is the key to the brain. Don't trust anyone, not even Mrs. Hayes, not really. Trust yourself. You've earned this. Protect it." I pressed the call button. The polished brass doors of the elevator slid open with a soft, expensive sigh. "I gave it to Chloe," I heard Mrs. Hayes continue, "because Vance Innovations is more than a company. It is a legacy, and that legacy is now hers to protect." That was when Darnell finally understood. He understood the key. He understood the private elevator. He understood that I wasn't just in line to get the company if he failed. He understood that I already had it. I already had everything. "No!" His scream was primal, a sound of pure animalistic rage. I heard him scrambling to his feet, chairs crashing to the floor in the conference room. "No, that's mine, my office, my money!" I stepped into the elevator. I heard him running, his expensive new shoes slipping on the marble. "Chloe, stop! You can't! That's my father's office!" I turned, calmly, and looked at his face, contorted with rage and terror, as he sprinted toward me. I was not the worthless woman. I was not the charity case. I was not the fool. I was the one with the key. "It's my office now, Darnell," I said. The elevator doors slid shut, silencing his scream, and I began to rise. The elevator glided upward, the mechanism humming a soft, powerful sound of ascent. I stood alone in the small, wood-paneled space, my reflection staring back at me from the polished brass. The woman in the reflection looked tired, but her eyes were clear. The entire chaotic scene in the conference room felt floors below me, a distant, muffled shout. All I could hear was the click of the floors passing. 38, 39, 40. The doors opened with a whisper onto the penthouse level. The CEO's office. It was not just an office. It was a sprawling suite. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing a breathtaking panorama of the city. For a moment, I just stood there. This was Elijah's sanctuary, the brain he'd spoken of. It smelled faintly of old books and the leather of the enormous, empty desk that faced the view. I was not alone. Standing near the desk were 2 people, Marcus Thorne, the chief financial officer, and Cynthia Bell, the head of human resources. They were both in their late 50s, seasoned veterans who had worked with Elijah for decades. They had been my secret allies for 3 years, the only two executives who knew I was the Shadow COO. They had been the ones feeding me the real data, bypassing Darnell's incompetence. They both looked tense, their expressions uncertain. They had heard the commotion downstairs. They were waiting to see who had won. Cynthia Bell, a tall, elegant woman with her gray hair in a perfect twist, stepped forward first. She looked at me, and her professional mask melted into a slow, warm smile of profound relief. "Welcome back, Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice rich with meaning. Then she corrected herself. "Or perhaps I should finally say, welcome officially." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 7 years. "Thank you, Cynthia. Marcus, I'm sorry about the noise. It seems the transition is going to be rockier than we'd hoped." "We've been handling the fallout all morning," Marcus Thorne said, his voice the gravelly monotone of a man who lives by numbers. He was holding a tablet. "Which brings us to the first order of business." I nodded, walking past him, running my hand along the smooth, cool wood of Elijah's desk. My desk. "We have a lot to do," I said. "Let's start with the damage." Marcus looked relieved to get straight to work. He tapped his tablet. "Darnell Vance has been busy. He was aware he was the preliminary heir. He called me at 8 a.m. this morning, before the will reading. He tried to authorize the immediate liquidation of $2 million worth of inventory from the West Coast warehouse." I looked up from the desk. "He what?" "He said he needed to free up capital for a new investment in Miami," Marcus said, his lip curling in distaste. "He was trying to sell $2 million of product at a 50% loss just to get cash today." I, of course, stalled him. I told him I needed authorization from the estate lawyer first. But he was insistent. I looked from Marcus to Cynthia. They were watching me, waiting. This was my first official act as leader. Darnell, in his infinite greed and stupidity, had given me the final piece of evidence I needed. He had not even waited a full day. I smiled, a cold, tight smile. "Wonderful," I said. "He just violated the will." I walked over to the speakerphone on the desk. "Mrs. Hayes, are you still with us?" Her voice came through the speaker instantly, sharp and clear from the conference room 40 floors below. "I am, Mrs. Vance. I am currently informing Mr. Vance, Mr. Miller, and Miss Miller of the legal ramifications of what just occurred. The video and audio from Elijah's will have been most effective." "Mrs. Hayes," I said, my voice steady, "I have new information. My CFO, Marcus Thorne, is here with me. Marcus, please repeat what you just told me about Darnell's activities this morning." Marcus repeated his report clearly, detailing Darnell's attempt to sell $2 million of company assets at a massive loss. There was a pause on the line, and I could almost hear Mrs. Hayes smiling. "Well," her voice came back, "that settles that. According to Article 4, Section 2, any attempt to sell company assets without board approval or for personal gain constitutes a failure of the condition. The 12-month trial period is officially over. The inheritance clause is triggered. Congratulations, Mrs. Vance. You are now the sole owner of Vance Innovations and the entire $65 million estate, irrevocably." I heard a muffled scream from the speakerphone. Tasha's voice cut off abruptly. "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes," I said. I looked at Cynthia and Marcus. "All right. We have work to do." I pressed the intercom button for the building's head of security. "This is Chloe Vance in the CEO's office. Please execute Protocol Elijah 1 immediately. All locks on all executive offices and access points are to be changed, effective this second. Issue a building-wide alert. Darnell Vance and Tasha Miller are to be permanently barred from this property. Their corporate credit cards, and those of their spouses, are to be deactivated as we speak. And please send a security team to the main lobby. I believe we have a trespasser who is about to be very, very upset." The main lobby of Vance Innovations was a cathedral of glass and steel designed to impress. But right now, it was the stage for an incredibly ugly performance. Darnell was screaming, his face purple with rage, pounding his fist on the marble reception desk. I am Darnell Vance. I own this building. You can't lock me out. Do you know who I am? The receptionist, a young woman who looked terrified, was shrinking back in her chair. Tasha and Ryan were trying to de-escalate, but it was like trying to calm a wild animal. Darnell, shut up, Tasha hissed, yanking on his arm. You're making a scene. I don't care, he roared, sweeping a stack of brochures off the desk. I want her down here. I want Chloe down here right now. She's a thief. She's a... Sir, is there a problem here? Two massive security guards, the kind who usually handle corporate security, stepped up behind Darnell. They were polite, but their presence was a solid wall of muscle. Darnell spun around. Yes, there's a problem. This woman, he pointed at the receptionist, won't let me go to my office. My father just died. I am the CEO. The head guard, whose name tag read Marcus, didn't even blink. Mr. Vance, we've just received new directives from the executive office. Your access privileges to this building have been revoked. Darnell looked at him as if he'd just started speaking in tongues. Revoked? My privileges? I am the owner. I am the CEO. No, sir, Marcus said, his voice flat. Our directive comes from the CEO. Mrs. Chloe Vance, you are now considered a trespasser. Please leave the premises immediately. You can't do this to me, Darnell yelled, his voice cracking. I'll have your job. I'll have all your jobs. I'll sue. He lunged for the elevator bay, but the guards were faster. They each took an arm, their grips firm. Sir, we will not ask you again. Please leave peacefully. Get your hands off me! Darnell struggled, but it was useless. He looked desperately at Tasha. Do something, Ryan! Tell them! Tasha turned on her husband, her face a mask of panic and fury. Ryan! Do something! You're a lawyer, for God's sake! Stop them! Ryan, her white, smug husband, was no longer smug. He was pale, his hands shaking. He was staring at the legal-sized envelope Mrs. Hayes had handed him. I can't, he stammered. What do you mean, you can't? Tasha shrieked. Tasha, it's ironclad. It's perfect. The video testimony, the corporate appointments, Elijah built a fortress. We can't touch it. There's no grounds to contest. So what? Tasha screamed. Fight them anyway. Lie. Say she threatened him. Say something. Tasha, you don't understand, Ryan said, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. He set us up. Elijah set me up. He documented my advice to Darnell about the asset sale. He documented my review of the preliminary will. Mrs. Hayes just informed me that I am listed as a potential co-conspirator in Darnell's attempt to fraudulently liquidate inventory. She's filing a report with the state bar. I could be disbarred for this, for advising Darnell on a will I didn't even read properly. Tasha stared at her husband, her eyes wide with horrified comprehension. All her plans, all her dreams of being the sister of a millionaire, of controlling the family fortune, evaporated. All she was left with was this pale, shaking, incompetent man. She looked at him with pure, unadulterated contempt. You idiot, she whispered. You useless, pathetic idiot. She turned her back on her husband. She looked at her brother, Darnell, who was still struggling weakly as the guards began to physically drag him toward the revolving glass doors. He looked pathetic. A 34-year-old man who had just lost $65 million because he was too lazy to read a document and too arrogant to see the wife he called worthless. And you, she screamed at Darnell, you're a fool. You had it all. You had $65 million in your hand, and you lost it. To Chloe, you lost it all. You're a failure. Tasha turned, her diamond earrings swinging, and stormed out of the lobby, leaving her husband and her brother behind. Darnell stopped struggling. He just looked stunned, defeated. As the guards pushed him through the revolving door, Marcus, the head guard, paused and spoke into his shoulder radio, his voice loud enough for Darnell to hear. "Ma'am? Yes, he's off the premises." He then looked up, directly at the security camera in the corner of the lobby. "Yes, Mrs. Vance, the lobby is secure. We are watching." And I was. From the 41st floor window, I watched Darnell stumble onto the rain-slicked pavement. A man who had woken up a millionaire and was now, quite literally, left out in the cold with nothing. I stood at the massive window of the CEO's office, 41 floors above the city. I had watched the security guards escort Darnell out of the building, his body language still screaming in protest, even as he disappeared into the rain. He looked so small from up here. The intercom buzzed. It was Mrs. Hayes. "May I come up, Mrs. Vance? We have a few items to finalize." A few minutes later, she walked into the office, carrying her own leather briefcase. She looked around the room, at the heavy mahogany desk and the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "Elijah loved this view," she said softly. "He said it reminded him that no problem was too big to solve. It just looked small from a distance." She sat down, all business. "Well, Chloe, you did it. Or rather, Elijah did. And you executed it perfectly." I was still processing. "So what happens now?" "Darnell failed the test by trying to sell the inventory. The clause is triggered. Is it really that simple?" "It is exactly that simple," Mrs. Hayes confirmed. Darnell's attempt to liquidate $2 million in assets was a direct violation of the clause. As of 10:17 a.m. this morning, he forfeited any and all claim to the estate. The $65 million, the company, the stocks, the real estate, it all transfers to you, free and clear. "Even the house?" I asked, thinking of the home Darnell had thrown me out of. "Especially the house," she said with a grim smile. "It was purchased during your marriage, yes, but with Elijah's money, which was put into a trust. Darnell had no claim to it until he inherited. Since he violated the will before the inheritance was finalized, he never owned it. And since he abandoned you, and you are filing for divorce on grounds of adultery and abuse, he has zero claim to any marital assets. He doesn't just get nothing, Chloe. He has nothing. He walked out of that building with nothing but his $10,000 suit and the watch on his wrist. And I suspect the credit card he bought those with was Elijah's." I let out a shaky breath. It was truly over. Just as I was about to thank Mrs. Hayes, the private line on the CEO's desk rang. A line I did not even know existed. Mrs. Hayes gestured to it. "That would be Elijah's personal line. Only family has this number." My stomach clenched. I pressed the speakerphone button. "Hello?" A voice shrieked through the speaker, so loud it was distorted. "Chloe, you devil, you whore! What did you do?" It was Darnell's mother, Brenda. I had not even realized she was not at the meeting. "Brenda," I said, my voice hardening, "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you lie to me. Darnell just called me. He's hysterical. He said you stole everything. You stole his inheritance. That was his. That was my son's money." "It was Elijah's money," I replied, my voice cold. "And he left it to me." "Because you seduced him!" she screamed. Tasha must have called her, fed her that lie. "Tasha told me, you were sleeping with my husband, weren't you? You played the innocent little wife, all while you were sleeping with a dying old man to get his money. You are a sick, disgusting, evil—" "No," I said. The word was sharp, final. It cut through her tirade and left a ringing silence. "What?" she stammered. "No," I repeated, standing up and walking to the window, looking down at the city I now owned a piece of. "I didn't seduce Elijah. I didn't have to. I worked for him." "You... what? You're a charity writer." "I am the chief operating officer of this company," I said, the words feeling right for the first time. "I have been for 3 years. While your son was at home, spending his father's money, sleeping until noon, and cheating on his wife, I was here. I was working. I was running the logistics. I was designing the software. I was saving the contracts Darnell lost." Elijah didn't give me this company because I seduced him. He gave it to me because your son was too lazy, too stupid, and too arrogant to do the one thing he was born to do: work. There was a choked sound on the other end of the line. Elijah paid me for my work, I continued. He paid me with his trust, and now he's paid me with his legacy. I have a $65 million company to run, Brenda. I don't have time for this. I pressed the button, ending the call, cutting off her sputtering protests. The silence in the office was absolute. Mrs. Hayes was watching me with an expression of deep admiration. Elijah was right about you, she said. You do have his grit. I nodded, then turned to the door. Cynthia Bell, Elijah's longtime executive assistant, was standing there, her hands clasped, a tentative look on her face. She had heard everything. Mrs. Vance? She asked. Cynthia, I said, walking to the desk. My desk. Please call an all-hands meeting for 2 p.m. this afternoon, in the main atrium. Cynthia looked surprised. All hands? Ma'am, the staff is confused. They're worried about the future. I know, I said. That's why they need to hear from their new boss. 6 months later, the main conference room at Vance Innovations was unrecognizable. The dark, heavy mahogany table was gone, replaced by a sleek, modern glass one. The walls were covered in whiteboards, filled with flowcharts and project timelines. I stood at the head of the room, now 33, dressed in a sharp navy blue dress, my natural hair styled in a confident afro. The room was packed with my executive team, investors, and tech journalists. I was launching our new proprietary logistics platform, Elijah's Eye, a predictive AI I had been developing with my father-in-law before he passed. Elijah's Eye doesn't just track shipments, I explained, my voice echoing with an authority I had earned. It anticipates global supply chain disruptions before they happen. It reroutes freight, optimizes fuel consumption, and saves our clients millions. The room was captivated. I was no longer the shadow COO. I was the CEO. And the company, under my undisputed leadership, had seen a 40% growth in just 2 quarters. I was confident, I was in command, and I was respected. This was my legacy now. Later that afternoon, back in my office, an email arrived from Mrs. Hayes. It was not a legal document, but a personal update. I sipped my coffee as I read. Dear Chloe, it began. I thought you might appreciate an update on the other Vances. My lips curved in a small smile. The email was concise. Darnell had tried to sue me, Tasha, and even Ryan, claiming a grand conspiracy. The judge had thrown the case out in less than an hour, citing the video Will and Darnell's own fraudulent actions. He was now officially unemployable, blacklisted in the business community. The last Mrs. Hayes had heard, he was living in Tasha's guest room, completely dependent on her. Tasha, in her arrogance, had leveraged her expected cut of Darnell's inheritance to make several high-risk investments with her husband, Ryan. When the $65 million evaporated, her creditors called in their loans. She had been forced to sell her mansion, her designer clothes, and her Escalade just to avoid bankruptcy. She was now renting a small condo with Darnell as her unwanted roommate. And Ryan, the smug white lawyer who had tried to intimidate me? His advice to Darnell had been so colossally incompetent and ethically bankrupt that it triggered an investigation by the state bar. He was facing disbarment. I closed the email. It was not triumph I felt, but a quiet, final sense of justice. They had not been destroyed by me. They had been destroyed by their own greed and arrogance. I turned back to my desk, to the stack of files that truly mattered. I was reviewing applications, just as I used to do in my old nonprofit job. But these were not grant proposals. These were applications for the Elijah Vance Engineering Scholarship, a fund I had established to send gifted, underprivileged African American students to top engineering programs. I was using Elijah's wealth to find more minds like his, more minds like mine. My assistant, Cynthia, buzzed the intercom. Her voice was hesitant, something I had not heard in months. Mrs. Vance? There is a visitor in the lobby. He does not have an appointment. Who is it, Cynthia? I asked, initialing a scholarship approval. There was a pause. It's Darnell Vance. He says he's your ex-husband, and he's here to ask for a job. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the intercom. Cynthia's voice was still hanging in the air. He's asking for a job. The audacity of it was breathtaking. After everything, after throwing me out, after the humiliation, after trying to steal my inheritance, he now believed he could come back and ask me for a job. The man who had called me worthless now wanted to be on my payroll. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. Send him up, Cynthia, I said, my voice calm. I'll see him. I stood up from my desk, Elijah's desk, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. I looked down at the city, at the empire we had built. Elijah and I. My empire. I heard the private elevator doors open behind me with a soft chime. I heard footsteps, hesitant and shuffling, on the expensive rug. I did not turn around. Chloe? His voice was a ghost. Weak, thin, unrecognizable. It was not the voice of the man who had roared at me in triumph, or the man who had spat at my feet. This was the voice of a beggar. You wanted to see me, Darnell? I asked, still looking out at the city. Chloe, please, look at me. I turned around slowly. The man standing in the middle of my office was a stranger. He was thin, gaunt almost. The expensive suit he'd worn to the will reading was gone. He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit that looked like it was from a discount store. It hung loosely on his frame. He was twisting a crumpled hat in his hands, his eyes bloodshot and desperate. The golden watch was gone. The $10,000 suit was gone. The $65 million arrogance was gone. You look terrible, Darnell, I said, not unkindly, just stating a fact. I know, he whispered, taking a shuffling step forward. Chloe, you look amazing. The power suits you. It's not power, Darnell, I said. It's work. I know, he stammered. I know I messed up. I know I was a fool. The biggest fool in the world. Tasha, she's barely speaking to me. Ryan lost his license. My mother, she blames me for everything. I'm living in a one-room apartment, Chloe. I can't find work. Nobody will hire me. The Vance name, it's poison. My name is poison. He took another step, his eyes pleading. But you're doing it. You're running the company. You're amazing. Just like you always were. I was just too stupid to see it. Yes, you were, I agreed. He was close now, close enough for me to smell the desperation on him. Chloe, please, I'm begging you. Give me a chance, a real chance. I've learned my lesson, I swear. I'll do anything. I'll be your driver. I'll manage the warehouse. I know logistics. My father, I interrupted, my voice sharp as glass, wanted me to run this company. He wanted someone with a brain, Darnell, someone with integrity, someone who understood the work. But he would want you to help me, Darnell cried, tears welling in his eyes. I'm his son, his only son. He wouldn't want to see me like this. He would want you to show mercy. Mercy? I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. You mean the same mercy you showed me? When you threw me out in the rain? When you spat at my feet and called me worthless? The same mercy you showed when you and Tasha planned to steal my inheritance, an inheritance you didn't even know existed? The same mercy you showed when you tried to sell off this company's assets for quick cash? I was upset, he wailed. I was grieving. You were celebrating, I corrected him. You were drinking champagne while I was sitting on a wet sidewalk. You were buying new suits while I was calling a friend who was too scared of you to help me. You were telling my own mother I was a whore, while I was hiding in a tiny apartment I had to keep secret from you for 7 years. I walked to my desk and sat down in the large leather CEO's chair. I looked at him, the broken, pathetic man who had for 7 years made my life a quiet hell. My father-in-law wanted me to run this company, I said, my voice final. And I am running it, and I'm doing a very, very good job. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Cynthia, please send security to the CEO's office. Darnell's face crumpled. No, Chloe, please, don't do this. I'm your husband. We're still married. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago, Darnell. You didn't even show up to court. The elevator doors opened, and the 2 large security guards, Marcus and his partner, stepped in. They saw Darnell and immediately understood the situation. Mrs. Vance? Marcus asked. Please escort Mr. Vance from the building. He's trespassing. No, Darnell shrieked as they grabbed his arms. You can't do this to me. I'm a Vance. This is my name on the building. You'll be nothing without that name. You're nothing but a nobody. The guards dragged him out, his screams echoing as he was pulled into the elevator. You're ungrateful. You're a thief. You'll be nothing without me. The elevator doors closed, and the office was blissfully silent. I sat there for a moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the city below. He was wrong. I wasn't nothing. I was everything. I picked up my phone and dialed Mrs. Hayes. Mrs. Hayes, it's Chloe. Yes, everything is fine. I'd like to finalize the paperwork we discussed. Yes, the name change. I swiveled in my chair to face the window, looking out at my city. That's right. Vance Logan Innovations. Logan is my family name. It's time I took it back. And yes, please proceed with the civil suit against Darnell and Tasha for the fraudulent inventory sale. I want them to understand the consequences of their actions. Thank you. I hung up. I had lost a husband. I had lost the toxic family that came with him. But I had gained $65 million, a company, a legacy, and most importantly, I had gained myself. And I was just getting started. This story teaches that true worth is built through quiet competence, not loud entitlement. While Darnell and Tasha dismissed Chloe as a worthless woman, she was secretly the one running the entire $65 million company. They celebrated a victory they hadn't earned, failing to realize the will was a trap set by Elijah to expose their greed and incompetence. Darnell's arrogance in firing his useless wife, the company's actual COO, was the very act that cost him everything. The ultimate payoff wasn't just Chloe inheriting wealth, it was proving she was the only one who had ever truly earned it. What do you think Darnell's face looked like when he realized Chloe was the real boss? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of ultimate justice.